Have you ever felt that the world has drawn a line in the sand, separating those who have everything from those who have nothing, and you are standing on the wrong side of that line? We often think that wealth is the ultimate wall, a barrier that keeps hearts apart. But sometimes, all it takes to shatter that wall is a single, brave question asked on a cold Christmas Eve. Before we dive into this story of heartbreak, redemption, and the miracle of human connection, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps us share these important stories with the world. And if you believe that kindness costs nothing but means everything, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the ending of this one. The city of Oakhaven was buried under a relentless blanket of white. It was Christmas Eve, the kind that exists in movies, storefronts glowing with amber light, breath visible in the freezing air, and the sound of carols muffled by the thick falling snow. But for Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Enterprises, the snow was just another inconvenience, another layer of cold to endure. Julian was a man who had conquered the business world by the age of 35. He possessed the kind of wealth that made price tags irrelevant. Yet, as he pushed open the heavy oak doors of the Gilded Holly, the city's most exclusive cafe, he felt a hollowness in his chest that no amount of money could fill. He wore a cashmere coat that cost more than most people's cars, yet he shivered. He walked to the back of the cafe, to a secluded booth upholstered in red velvet, and sat down. He didn't wait for a host. He owned the building, after all. He placed his phone on the table, screen down, and signaled for a black coffee. No sugar. No joy. He had come here to hide from the festivities, to escape the memories of a family he had lost to time and neglect, and to be alone with his empire of silence. Outside, on the other side of the frosted glass, Elara stood shivering. Her coat was thin, a patchwork of thrift store finds, and her boots were leaking the slush of the city streets into her socks. Elara was 22, an aspiring artist whose canvas was currently life itself, and life was painting in shades of gray. She had just finished a double shift at a diner 3 blocks away, but her tips had been meager. In her pocket, she clutched a crumpled $10 bill, all she had to buy a Christmas gift for her younger brother, Leo, who was waiting at home with a fever and a belief in Santa Claus that broke her heart. She was exhausted. Her bones ached. She looked through the window of the Gilded Holly. It looked like heaven. It smelled, even through the glass, of roasted chestnuts and rich chocolate. She knew she didn't belong there. The people inside wore jewelry that sparkled brighter than the stars. But the cold was biting into her marrow, and she just needed 5 minutes of warmth. Just 5 minutes to feel like a human being. Elara pushed the door open. The bell above it chimed, a cheerful sound that seemed to announce her inadequacy to the room. The warmth hit her like a physical blow, thawing her frozen cheeks. The cafe was crowded, filled with laughter and the clinking of porcelain. Every seat was taken. Every seat, except one. In the back corner, a man sat alone in a booth meant for 4. He looked like a king in exile, staring into a black cup. Elara hesitated. The manager, a man with a stiff upper lip and eyes that scanned for net worth, was already moving toward her, ready to intercept the riffraff. Panic rose in Elara's throat. She didn't want charity, she just wanted to sit. Before the manager could reach her, she moved. She walked straight to the back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stopped at the edge of the velvet booth. Julian didn't look up. He was lost in the dark reflection of his coffee. Elara cleared her throat. It was a small sound, swallowed by the jazz music playing overhead. She tried again, louder this time. "Excuse me." Julian slowly raised his eyes. They were the color of steel, cold and sharp. He looked at her tattered coat, her red nose, her wet boots dripping onto the expensive Persian rug. He didn't speak, he just raised an eyebrow, an unspoken command for her to leave him be. But Elara didn't leave. She gripped the back of the empty chair opposite him, her knuckles white. She looked him in the eye, summoning every ounce of dignity she had left, and asked the question that would change both their lives. Is this seat only for the rich? The question hung in the air, heavier than the scent of cinnamon and pine. Julian blinked. He was used to people asking for money, for jobs, for favors. He was used to people trembling in his presence. He was not used to being challenged. "Excuse me," he said, his voice deep and smooth, like a jagged rock wrapped in velvet. "I asked," Elara said, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm, "if this seat is reserved only for people who have bank accounts that match their phone numbers. Because I don't. But I am freezing, my feet hurt, and this is the only empty chair in the entire city. I have enough for a coffee. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for a seat." Julian stared at her. For a moment, the mask of the ruthless CEO slipped. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, a fatigue he recognized, though his came from boardrooms and hers came from survival. He saw the defiance. And strangely, he saw a reflection of himself from 20 years ago, before the money, when he was just a hungry kid in a cold world. The manager arrived at the table then, breathless and apologetic. "Mr. Thorne," the manager hissed, reaching for Elara's arm. "I am so terribly sorry. I will remove this disturbance immediately. Miss, you need to leave. Now." Elara flinched, preparing to be thrown back into the snow. She began to turn, shame burning her face. "Wait," Julian said. The single word stopped the manager cold. Julian looked from the manager to Elara, and then gestured to the empty seat. "She's not a disturbance," Julian said calmly. "She's my guest." The manager's jaw dropped. Elara froze. "Sit," Julian commanded, though his tone was softer than before. "Please." Slowly, warily, Elara sat. The velvet was soft, impossibly soft. She sank into it, the tension leaving her shoulders. "2 coffees," Julian told the stunned manager. "The holiday blend. And bring the pastry tower. The big one." When the manager scurried away, silence stretched between them. Julian studied her. "That was a brave question," he said. "Desperation makes you brave," Elara replied, unbuttoning her coat to let the warmth in. "I'm Elara." Julian nodded. "Julian. Why are you out in this storm, Elara? It's Christmas Eve. Shouldn't you be with family?" Elara looked down at her hands. They were chapped and red. "My family is a 6-year-old boy named Leo who thinks I'm Santa Claus. I was trying to find a way to make that true." Julian felt a pang in his chest. "And are you? Santa Claus?" Elara laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I have $10. Santa is on a budget this year. I was hoping to buy him a toy train, but the ones he wants are." She trailed off, gesturing around the room. "Out of reach." The coffee arrived, along with a 3-tiered stand of pastries that looked too beautiful to eat. Macarons, tarts, chocolate eclairs dusted with gold leaf. Elara stared at it. "Go ahead," Julian said. "I can't eat all of this. It's wasteful." Elara took a macaron hesitantly. The first bite was an explosion of flavor that made her close her eyes. Julian watched her. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something other than ambition. He felt curiosity. "Why are you here alone?" Elara asked, wiping a crumb from her lip. "You have the kingdom. Where is the court?" Julian's face darkened. He looked out the window. "The court is interested in the crown, not the king. My wife passed away 3 years ago. Since then, Christmas is just a day the stock market closes." They sat there for an hour. 2 strangers from different galaxies, colliding in a booth at the Gilded Holly. They talked about art. Elara sketched on napkins, showing him the world through her eyes, a world of beauty found in broken things. They talked about Leo. They talked about the burden of expectation. For that hour, Julian wasn't a CEO. He was just a man. And Alara wasn't a struggling waitress. She was heard. But the bubble had to burst. Alara's phone buzzed. It was a text from her neighbor who was watching Leo. Asterisk, he's coughing up blood. You need to come home. Now, asterisk. The color drained from Alara's face. She stood up so abruptly she nearly knocked over the coffee. I have to go, she gasped, grabbing her bag. What's wrong? Julian asked, sensing the shift in the air. It's Leo. He's sick. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for the seat. She threw the crumpled $10 bill onto the table. For my share. Then she ran. She ran out of the warmth, back into the biting cold, disappearing into the white swirl of the storm. Julian sat frozen. He looked at the $10 bill. It was wrinkled, stained, and it was everything she had. She had insisted on paying. He looked at the empty seat. The hollowness in his chest returned, but this time, it was accompanied by a fierce, burning resolve. He couldn't let the story end like this. Julian grabbed his coat. He threw a stack of $100 bills on the table, enough to buy the silence of the manager and the coffee for everyone in the room, and ran out the door. The wind howled. The snow was blinding. Alara, he shouted. But the street was empty. He didn't know her last name. He didn't know where she lived. He only knew she had a brother named Leo and she was desperate. He pulled out his phone. Find her, he told his head of security. Check the local clinics. Check the artist registries. A girl named Alara with a brother named Leo. I don't care what it costs. Find her. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of Julian pacing in his penthouse, looking out at the city that suddenly felt like a prison. Then, the call came. St. Jude's Community Hospital. Emergency room. Julian was in his car in 2 minutes. When he burst into the waiting room of the underfunded, overcrowded hospital, he saw her. Alara was curled up in a plastic chair, her head in her hands. She looked smaller than she had in the cafe. Julian walked over and kneeled in front of her. He placed a hand on her knee. Alara looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Julian, she whispered, as if imagining him. How is he? Julian asked gently. Pneumonia, Alara choked out. Complications. They need to transfer him to a specialist unit, but, my insurance. I don't have. She couldn't finish the sentence. She began to sob, a raw, broken sound that tore through the sterile room. He's 6, Julian. He's all I have. Julian stood up. He walked to the nurse's station. The nurse looked up, annoyed, until she saw the look on his face, and the platinum card he placed on the counter. I want Leo Vance transferred to the best pediatric wing in the city. Mount Sinai. Private transport. Immediately. And I want the best specialists on call. The nurse looked at the card, then at him. Sir, that will cost a fortune. I didn't ask the price, Julian said. I gave an order. Do it. They spent Christmas morning not under a tree, but in a private hospital room. Leo was stabilized, sleeping soundly in a bed that looked like a spaceship, hooked up to machines that hummed reassuringly. The room was filled with toys, more trains than a boy could play with in a lifetime. Julian had emptied a toy store at 4 a.m. Alara stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the snow-covered city. She turned to Julian, who was sleeping uncomfortably in a chair in the corner. He opened one eye as she approached. Why? She asked softly. Why did you do this? You don't even know us. Julian sat up and rubbed his face. He looked at the sleeping boy, then at Elara. "You asked if the seat was only for the rich," he said. "For a long time, I thought the answer was yes. I thought my seat, my life, was exclusive. I thought I had earned the right to be alone because I had won the game. But when you sat down, you reminded me that a seat is just a chair unless you share it. You gave me $10, Elara. You gave me everything you had. I'm just trying to match your investment." Elara cried then, silent tears of relief and gratitude. Julian stood and hugged her. It was awkward at first, two people from different worlds bridging the gap, but then it became real. A human connection forged in the fire of a crisis. "You're not alone anymore," Julian whispered. "And neither am I." 1 year later. The gilded holly was buzzing with Christmas energy. The snow was falling just as softly as before. In the back corner, the velvet booth was occupied. But it wasn't a lonely king sitting there. It was a family. Julian was laughing, actually laughing, as a 7-year-old Leo tried to balance a spoon on his nose. Elara was sitting beside them, sketching the scene in a leather-bound sketchbook, wearing a coat that was warm and new. She was now the head of the Thorn Foundation's arts initiative, helping underprivileged kids find their voice through art. Julian caught her eye across the table. He reached out and took her hand. The manager walked by, smiling genuinely this time, and placed a fresh pot of coffee on the table. Elara squeezed Julian's hand. She remembered the girl she was a year ago, frozen, desperate, standing on the outside looking in. She looked at the empty chair next to Leo. A young man, shivering and looking lost, had just walked into the cafe. He looked at the crowded room, his eyes filled with the same panic Elara once felt. Elara didn't hesitate. She kicked Julian gently under the table and nodded toward the young man. Julian turned, saw the boy, and smiled. He waved the young man over. "Excuse me," Julian called out, his voice booming over the jazz. "Are you looking for a place to sit?" The young man nodded, terrified. Is that seat taken?" he asked, pointing to the empty chair. Elara smiled, the brightest thing in the room. "No," she said. "This seat isn't reserved for anyone. It's for everyone. Please, sit." And as the young man sat down, joining the circle of warmth, the invisible line that separates the rich from the poor, the lucky from the lost, dissolved completely. Because in the end, no seat is ever truly owned. We are all just guests here, and the only rent we have to pay is kindness. Thank you for watching this story. If it touched your heart, please remember that you have the power to offer someone a seat, a smile, or a hand up today. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in miracles, and subscribe for more stories that feed the soul. Until next time, keep your heart open. You never know who might need a seat at your table.